US and UK forces have carried out airstrikes in Yemen against Houthi rebel targets. The Houthis control much of the country, and they say they're supporting their ally Hamas by targeting shipping which is heading to Israel. It marks a significant point in the continuing conflict in the Middle East. And joining us now to talk about this is David Dunn, Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham. David, good morning.
Good morning.
Now, David, the question of targeting Houthis in Yemen, maybe you could give us a little background to the situation in Yemen anyway. Who are the Houthis and what is the political situation in Yemen?
So the Houthis are a group that have fought a civil war in Yemen. They have effectively got de facto control of 70% of the country. They are aligned religiously and politically to Iran, and they have been fighting Saudi Arabia, saying as part of that civil war for a while. They are sympathetic to Hamas, which is also Iranian-backed in Palestine, and they are acting in sympathy with Hamas by attacking Western shipping because they believe that in doing so they are in solidarity with Hamas and in opposition to what they regard as the backers of Israel.
Now, who are the other parties in Yemen? I mean, if the Houthis are controlling 70% of the territory, what are they by population and who are the others?
So there's a Sunni Shia split. The country was run until relatively recently by the Sunnis. They are in control of the south of the country, of Aden and areas there. But as I say, that since 2022, there's been effectively a ceasefire, an armistice in place, so there hasn't been much actual fighting. But the Houthis are not recognized as a legitimate government, but they are the de facto controller of, I say, a large swathe of the country.
Now, what role does Saudi Arabia play in the conflict in Yemen?
So Saudi Arabia has, because of their religious co-religionists, they have been supporters of the Sunni recognized government of Yemen, and they have been supplying them with weapons and in fact actually also engaged in the civil war. But effectively their client in that war has lost control of large part of the country, and I say there is an uneasy peace that's been in place for the last couple of years or so.
So the Sunni government that was displaced by the Houthis, but the Sunni government has the support of Saudi Arabia, which has been supplying them with armaments, munitions and help and so on. But the Houthis are the de facto power. Why do you think the Houthis are deciding to attack shipping in the Red Sea? Because they know what the retaliation will be. It's happened before. Why do they want to bring more trouble down on their own heads?
It's partly because they have aspirations to be seen as an international actor. I say that the civil war movement, this disputed status that they have ambitions to be recognized as a major player on the world stage. They also have achieved the status they have by being a client of Iran, and the issue is how much they are acting on the instructions of Iran. But certainly they're working with Iran in terms of being supporting that wider solidarity with the Shia factions, and Hamas are part of that.
Now, the scale of the attacks by the Americans and the United Kingdom, I'm not sure who was the larger component of those attacks, but they were fairly significant.
Yeah, so the UK presence was 4 Typhoon aircraft flying from Cyprus, and their presence there is largely symbolic to make it a joint multilateral operation. But the UK contribution was a small one and a symbolic one. The American operation, they struck 16 different locations and 60 targets with that. So that was quite a large attack, much larger than the attack they did in 2016 when they fired a few cruise missiles, and that was enough to stop the Houthis from continuing their attacks at that point. So the purpose of this attack and the scale of it is three things. It's about destroying and degrading the capacity of the Houthis to attack shipping. So they went after storage facilities, drone sites, missile sites, command and control sites. The second purpose is to actually make good on the threats that they made. If you make threats and then don't follow them through, you lose credibility. So having made threats over a number of weeks, the coalition was making good on those threats. And thirdly, the purpose of the attack was actually to signal to Iran that we will not just stand by and not respond to attacks or escalations if that escalations is what you initiate. So it's about signaling to the wider Middle East as much as it is to actually the military action to the Houthis themselves.
Now, when you say they targeted very specific things, we're used to the Israelis telling us that they target Hamas targets and some civilians are killed, but basically they're going after command and control and the tunnels and the weapons dumps and so on that Hamas have in Gaza. The reality for ordinary people in Gaza is very different. Well over 20,000 people killed, almost 60,000 people wounded or maimed. What can we tell about the strikes in Yemen? Were they as forensic as they would like us to believe?
Yeah, it's a really good question, but a number of important points to make. I mean, Gaza is one of the most densely populated parts of the planet, and therefore any use of bombs on a situation like that, you're going to have high levels of casualties. And particularly the ordnance used, the bombs used by the Israelis were not very discriminated. They're very high explosives. Partly the difficulty of going after tunnel networks, things are hardened and underground. You need a bigger explosion to destroy them, and that has much more collateral damage. With the targets that the Americans and British have used in Yemen, that they've used what they said is that they've kept civilian life to a minimum. Certainly, the Royal Air Force prides itself on having very tight rules of engagement, whereby the collateral damage is enough of a reason to put you off doing certain missions if you were to do that. And what the reports of the military action last night say is that they have targeted things away from civilian scientists. They've kept civilian life loss to an absolute minimum, and that they've focused on distant from civilian population military targets, and done so in a way that actually makes us clear that it's a counter-military attack rather than a counter-population attack.
And they clearly have intelligence in this regard. They knew what they were going for. By the way, where are the aircraft coming from? Are they coming from carriers around the Gulf, or are they coming from places like Cyprus?
Yeah, so the UK has typhoons based in Cyprus, and they flew a long mission from Cyprus, having to be refueled on the way to do that. It just is so that the UK could say that it was participating in the operation. In addition to that, there has been cruise missiles fired from submarines. I don't know whether the UK hasn't been able to find out this morning whether the UK fired cruise missiles from its cruise missile firing submarines, or whether that was entirely from American submarines. But the most of the strikes would be from carrier-based aircraft on American carriers in the region. And interestingly, of course, also what the Americans are saying is that the Dutch, the Bahrainis, the Australians, and the Canadians offered logistical and intelligence cooperation, making, in their view, this a wider coalition operation rather than just the UK and the US.
So this response, finally, I mean, there have been provocations by the Houthis before, and the Americans have stayed their hand. Eventually, they have taken the action. Given the objectives of this action, to deter the Iranians, to warn the Houthis that terrible things will happen to them if they persist, do you think this will work?
It's the $1 million question, really, in terms of work, in terms of restoring America's credibility. It's Biden not appearing weak domestically in an election year. There's a lot of aspects to work in this, in terms of actually trying to deter operations, or to reassure commercial shipping that actually the West is doing something on their behalf. I say in 2016, The action stopped when military action was done. This time, it seems unlikely, given what the Houthis are saying. They say they're in for a long fight. They have been armed by Iran to be in for a long fight. This could be a longer conflict in terms of if they keep up the attacks on shipping, the Americans and British will feel obliged to do further strikes to try and degrade their operation. But who knows at this stage?
Now, it's a populous country, maybe close enough to 40 million of a population, and they have been, besides odd reporting of the conflict in Yemen, they have been ignored. The Qataris, on the other hand, with a population of just a couple of million, are seen as some sort of players in the area. So the Houthis want to make Yemen much of a player. But could this particular difficulty they're now having with attacks by the UK and the US, could it give some motive to the Sunnis in Yemen to rearm themselves and have another go?
Entirely possible, actually. I mean, Saudi Arabia got a lot of criticism internationally for its action in Yemen. It was seen as the dominant party, the bullying party, all the rest of those things by a number of observers. And yet, the recklessness of the Houthis, the fact that they wanted to join in somebody else's war, effectively, and the way in which actually they are disrupting the lifeline of the communications of the West and supply of not just food and material, but importantly power, and particularly natural gas from Qatar to Europe, where of course Europe is trying to cut the supply of gas from Russia. At a time when doing all of these things, it doesn't actually make itself very popular in the wider world. So it could reopen the wider civil war that's been nascent in Yemen. In terms of how Iran responds to this is another possible aspect of escalation. There are a number. I mean, one of the reasons why the Americans have shown a huge amount of restraint in terms of actually 3 weeks, 27 attacks on commercial shipping and no response from the Americans is that they've been concerned to try and deal with this diplomatically, or indeed to actually show that restraint because of the fear of escalation on a number of multiple points.
And finally, the political question: any political risk for Rishi Sunak, engaging the UK forces in some sort of a war action without the say-so of Parliament?
I think he would have thought long and hard about that. The fact that he's timed himself to be in Ukraine today, showing himself to be the international statesman. I think the nature, that the flagrant use of violence unprovoked by commercial shipping means that he will get, when he does call Parliament back, he will get not universal, but he'll get bipartisan support. Keir Starmer will want to offer solidarity, want to be the Prime Minister in waiting and be the responsible statesman. You may get a few Labour MPs, perhaps even Jeremy Corbyn, voting against the resolution that finally comes before Parliament. But for Starmer's point of view, to be on a different side of that vote than Jeremy Corbyn will be seen as a good thing. It may actually strengthen Sunak whenever there is questions of national security and the use of force. That tends to have a rally round the flag effect, and it tends to actually boost the person who uses force because it's seen that they are being resolute and that the Britain is acting responsibly on the world stage.
David Dunn, Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham, thank you very much for joining us.